evening. I'm Bruce Kidd, and I'm delighted to be here. Are sports still play? Sports present a great paradigm of play. They enable joyous, self-directed, fully embodied creative expression, often with some of our dearest friends in a sea of communal celebration. Many of us spend some of our happiest moments in sports, unhurried by the world in an endless series of improvisations. I used to play hockey with my wife and a few friends late every Sunday night on an outdoor pad at Prince of Wales Park overlooking Humber Bay. The streets and the neighborhood would be quiet, and the only sounds we heard were those from the ice. Those games were the highlight of my week. When I missed a pass or needed a rest, I looked out over the skyline of Toronto and felt at peace. There are 101 sayings that capture this sentiment. My favorite comes from playing baseball growing up in the East End of Toronto. You win a few, you lose a few, but the ones that hurt the most are the ones rained out. Watching sports can be just as exuberant, with almost as many opportunities for creativity and camaraderie. Fans can add their own strategies, costumes, and commentaries. In many venues, they become the extra player. Yet today, many sports have become extremely regimented, and the opportunities for self-direction and spontaneity severely diminished. At every age and level of ability, participants are expected to obey the dictates of a coach, follow a system, and hone their bodies to the requirements of their sport. The language of play has been replaced by that of conformity, sacrifice, and work. In youth sport, organized teams and leagues have replaced pickup or other forms of participant-initiated games, and the best athletes are taxied by parents to an endless schedule of practices and games conducted by professional coaches and managers. At the highest levels, in the Olympic and professional sports, training and competition are ruthlessly subordinated to winning, at the expense of the other rich meanings that resonate with sports. Athletes, coaches, and managers' very livelihoods are dependent upon whether they win. The Olympic movement, dear to my heart, began as a project of educational reform focusing on intercultural communication and sport for all. The International Olympic Committee still lionizes the self-actualizing individual as the epitome of Olympic values. Yet the Canadian Olympic Committee helped create Own the Podium, which suggested to the world that Canada only invited everyone to Vancouver Whistler in order to beat them, and which has divided the entire pan-Canadian sports system into funded winners and impoverished losers. When Dick Pound and I competed in the Olympics half a century ago, we competed fiercely to win, but the ideal was to prepare for a non-sporting career, and when we traveled to engage in cultural performances and intercultural exchange as well. Today, most Canadian athletes abroad stay in their hotel rooms, lying on their backs, visualizing their races. Of course, the transformation of sport into work did not happen overnight, but over the course of the complex, society-wide specialization and speed-up that has advanced steadily over the last century. Today, the best athletes train twice or three times as frequently as we did a generation ago. Should we worry? I'm less concerned about the best Olympic and professional athletes who still find ways to enjoy and be creative despite the structures confining them, and have unions and associations to protect them. Nor am I worried very much about the thousands of masters or adult recreational athletes, mostly from the middle class, who play for the pleasures sport bring and have the means to walk away if the requirements become too onerous. But I worry a lot about children and youth. Enjoyable sport can be an entry to a lifetime of healthy physical activity, yet in national surveys, participation is falling like a stone. It is unhappiness with the initial sports experience that drives many of the children into dropping out. So let's do something about it. In the first place, we can do a much better job of providing inclusive, quality physical education and after-school sports, with a focus on education for life and enjoyment, not just performance. It would make a world of difference. Very few of the problems of youth sport emerge from public schools. It would also help correct the woeful inequality that now characterizes Canadian sport. Today, the children of the upper classes are 3 times more likely to participate than those from poor families. As sociologist Rick Bruno has observed, Gordie Howe would never make it to the NHL today. His parents could never have afforded all the fees. Secondly, while it will drive many parents crazy, I would take them out of kids' sports, especially during competition, and enable the children to conduct and govern their own games. Many years ago, the American educational reformer Frederick Rand Rogers, while superintendent of New York State schools, instituted a requirement for player control, in which during games, adults had to stay in the stands. The system significantly increased students' participation and enjoyment, but then Rogers retired and the coaches regained their control of the games. Today, my colleague Peter Donnelly proposes very much the same. It would be very much worth adopting. Sport should be about play, not work. As my good colleague Andy Higgins used to say, if you miss the joy of it, you miss it all.